Everyone. Have you ever wondered why malicious actors use different techniques while developing their malware, or how they think? Well, today I'm going to present you the techniques of a prevalent banker over the years through an offensive perspective, and I hope I'm going to answer to the previous questions. Well, my name is Marian Gusatu, and I'm a specialist threat researcher at NortonLifeLock. Currently, we have changed our name, and now we are Gen Digital. My main responsibilities are threat and vulnerability research. Well, let's get into it. Today's topic, I'm going to start with a brief introduction to Black Moon and the terminology, the technical analysis of a malware family, how the malware arrives, the delivery methods and expected results, the techniques that were used in the latest version of Black Moon, the offensive perspective over those techniques, and some comparison with other variants of this malware. Okay, so a short introduction. Black Moon, it's also known as Bambra or KR Banker because it was originally in Korea in 2014. And its malware category, it's a Trojan, a banker, exactly. And its scope is to steal credentials from banking institutions' client in order to access their accounts and gain access to their financial information. Other variants also delivered malicious payloads to the targeted users. Okay, a short disclaimer. We are not covering all the Black Moon variants due to various reasons. One of them is the fact that the time is limited for this talk, and some changes were small, so we didn't want to mention them because the flow was somehow the same, but the changes were really small. And also the research was done based on our telemetry, so there might be some cases that we have probably missed, but let's focus on the one that are part of this presentation. Okay, here are some numbers regarding the samples that were identified in the years. The idea is that even the malware started in 2014, we still received a lot of samples in 2022. Here is photo from our telemetry, and between June and September 2022, we received around 70,000 samples, so the numbers are still increasing. Okay, a short recap about malware analysis. This is how a portable executable looks on disk. A PE file is actually the executable files on Windows systems. So we see here the architecture in the header, the sections, the compile time, and other informations that are valuable. About static analysis, we refer to static analysis as everything that we can obtain from a sample without executing it. So everything that we can see, like strings, linked libraries, imports, function, exports, and others. When we are talking about dynamic analysis, we will run the sample and see everything that the sample is doing on the system, like registry modifications, if there are any process activity or network activity, and then we can go to the debugging state, to kernel debugging, user mode debugging, and dump some memory and see what we can extract from that point. Okay, now the delivery methods for Black Moon. Well, it was social engineering and also by other malware. By social engineering, we meant that the user is tricked to allow malware onto their machines, and this is actually made by psychological manipulation. And I have a statement here. A good scam is targeting people's reaction on specific emotions. So these are the ones that have the most impact because they are somehow playing with our emotions. Okay, how this is done? Via spam emails, attachments, adware campaigns, or as mentioned before, through other malwares. Droppers, downloaders, backdoors. What are those exactly? Well, a dropper drops the malicious file on disk, a downloader interact with the internet and make requests and try to download the malicious payload into the system. And the backdoor means that the attacker already gained access to the targeted machine and just download the malware and execute it. Okay, now the infection chain of the latest version identified in our telemetry. We have here the initial sample that is going to drop a file into program files, then it's going to create some persistence in services. After that, it's going to, the service is going to start and a new process is going to be run, and the payload, it's executed, it's injected actually in memory and then it's executed. Okay. At step 6, I see here is a little problem with the presentation, but at step 6 we have a VBS file, a script that is going to just delete the initial file from disk. Okay. Now we can see the first thing that we observed is that the file was packed with a common packer. What packing means? Well, actually, we can think like the executable is compressed and we don't have access to the initial information, like we cannot access all the strings, all the import files, and everything that was mentioned before at static analysis. So I'm going to focus on something more visual now. We can see here that a new process is created, the fd launcher sa.exe. This is really important because, as mentioned before, the persistence was done via services, and we can see at sample.exe that we don't have the new process under its initial process tree. Why this is made? Why this was done actually? Well, because some defensive mechanisms are watching over the process tree of the initial sample, and in order to evade such detections, it's actually starting from the services.emc, the service manager on Windows. So this is actually an evasion technique. Okay, now what we can see here is that the process the sample fd launcher SA was dropped on the program files under a named Microsoft SQL Server Compact Edition. Do anyone know why this was done? Can we think about an interpretation why this was made? Why in that directory? Why in that? Why under that name? Well, you can think about it and maybe you will answer later. I really want to hear your opinion about that. And also we can see here that we have persistence as a service. The name and description is also related to Microsoft services, and the start type is to. So the service is gonna start automatically. So again, through an offensive perspective, this is done to various reasons. One of them, let's see, like, okay, the user understand that, okay, I'm compromised, I see new files on disk or something like that. Let's just shut the computer down and boot it again. Well, when we have persistence over these kind of samples, it doesn't matter because the sample is gonna start again at each boot. So this is done for persistence. Okay, here a little cleanup stage where the script it's going to delete the initial file from disk, and Here we can see the process injection phase and the network communication that is going to gather the information from the user system. Okay, after we after we dumped the memory and retrieved the process injection, we analyzed it, and we see here some strings that are related with everything that I already mentioned before. So the SQL, Microsoft SQL service, the location of the file, and also some of the URLs that are used. Okay. Another technique, it's the fact that some strings were hidden, and this was done by moving a single character at a time. This is actually made because when we try to retrieve all the strings from a sample, we don't always recognize such strings, because they are placed one character at a time, and usually someone is looking on strings that are longer as analyzing the sample. Okay. So here is the meter techniques, all the techniques that were identified for this sample. They are presented in this table, and they are a sum up of what I have already presented. And now I would like to go to the techniques comparison with other variants of this malware, because as mentioned before, it started in 2014 and we are still receiving samples today. In 2014, a little background, it was used the farming attack. So the traffic is redirected from a website to another, and that another website is usually owned by a malicious actor, and it's made in a way to masquerade the legitimate one, so the user will be tricked and put his credential in there. Okay, when we are performing a web request using DNS, it's important to know that IP information is retrieved from the local system in this order. First, the DNS cache memory, it's going to be checked, then the host.ics file, which lays under C, Windows, System32, drivers, etc. And then the hosts file without an extension, which stays in the same directory. Okay, this is really important because it's going to be used by the attackers in 2014. The setup was done like this. First, we have the initial sample. It's going to make a web request, a GET request. And something interesting is that we have here at that page a zip file. But the zip file, it's not actually a zip file. It's just containing the zip header. And if we try to download that zip file and open it as a zip, we won't be able to do that because it only has the header of the zip file and all the content is encrypted. So what is actually happening, the sample is decrypting the data, and this host.ics file, which will contain multiple banking internet pages, which are going to be moved under the specified folder with name host.exe. So, okay, why this is done? I think you can guess it, but the fact is that next stage is to disable the DNS cache memory using the registry, and we are going to see that the malware is creating some persistence, and again, we can expect that the file is going to run when the system is going to boot again. Okay, how the data is collected? This is really simple because now the user is compromised. When he is going to make a request, it's going to use the IP that is specified in the host.exe. So this is going to be freshly a new list of IPs each time the system boots. Okay. Now, in 2016, a little background, we have a proxy that it's an intermediary for our requests, and a pack file, which is actually a JavaScript that it's going to decide what is going to happen with our request. Okay. In the same configuration, the initial sample is going to start a proxy, which is going to be host on the encrypted JavaScript, which is going to decide what is going to happen with our request. The decrypted JavaScript contains multiple internet banking pages, and when the data is going to be collected, the user is going to make a request. And the pack file, it's actually going to check what type of request is there. So if the request is something related with a banking institution, it's going to redirect it to the malicious website. Otherwise, it's going to resolve it as a normal request. Okay. Now, in 2017, we have a downloader which is going to perform a GET request to a web page, and is going to download a malicious file on disk. Okay. The file is going to be executed, and we can see here that something new has changed in the way of operation of this malware. So a XOR operation is going to be made on some of its bytes in order to decode an URL, and it's going to make a GET request to that URL, which is going to download a GPG file on disk. Okay, now that file is actually not a GPG file, and it's going to make another XOR to decode the bytes of that GPG file and obtain a new portable executable one. That portable executable, it's going to be executed, and it's going to check the device language. This is a really interesting step, because if the language doesn't correspond with the targeted country, it's just going to stop. Otherwise, it's going to interact with the command and control server, and it's going to download the black moon, and then it's going to execute it. At this step, it doesn't matter what kind of black moon it is, if it's 2014, 2016, 20 whatever stage. The important thing is that all those steps were done with what reason? Can someone guess it? Okay, someone said like to not download the binary directly on the virtual machine and analyze it. Yes, yes.
Designed to try to trigger any defenses, and then if all those steps go through, sorry. I would say that all those steps are designed to try and trigger any defenses, possibly. And if it so happens that all of this execution passes successfully, then it's more likely that Black Moon will also be executed successfully.
Yes, somehow it's done to actually evade detection for the payload, the Black Moon. So to somehow not detect in the first stage the malware directly. So just go to the downloaders over and over again and see where it can get. Okay. In 2021, the stages were a little different. So the initial sample made a copy of itself. Then it drops a VBS file that downloaded the payload. which it's actually going to perform a GET request and obtain that malicious file, and then it's going to run the malware. After that, the persistence is going to be created in the runner registry for the copy. So if the initial sample is going to be deleted, the copy is going to be still there, and the persistence is made on the copy of the malware. Okay. Now, as a conclusion, it is actually better when you know what you are fighting against. So what I wanted to point is that both offensive perspectives and defensive perspectives are linked together. Through an offensive perspective, when we want to see things through an offensive perspective, adversaries have to evaluate, need to evaluate all the mechanisms that defensive solutions provide in order to bypass them. And when we are creating powerful defensive solutions, we have to take in considerations how adversaries think and to try to identify and mitigate such actions. And this is what we work on at Gen Digital. We try to build powerful defensive solutions. Well, thank you. If you have any questions, please. And also, I want to check the answers for the previous question. Sorry, can we help with the microphone?
Thank you for the presentation. One question here. Is this avoidable by using a secure DNS server, or will it be overwritten anyway?
Excuse me, could you please repeat the question?
Is this avoidable by using a secure DNS server, or will it be overwritten anyway?
If it is...
if you can avoid downloading the malicious...
well, yes, this can be avoided through different mechanisms, and this can also be detected also.
Okay, but if you change your DNS server, does it help in any way? Or it's
well, the idea is that you are referring to the DNS cache memory stage at 2017 when it was disabled and it was used the host.ics file.
Basically, I'm trying to figure out if you can avoid this by without antivirus or anything like that.
Use a proxy?
Depends, yeah. Use a proxy or different techniques, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So to the first question, the answer is to make it seem legit that it belongs to Microsoft. At least that's what I think. There is no compact edition anyway, so it wouldn't overwrite anything. It would seem like an artifact because Microsoft does leave artifacts in setups.
Okay, yes.
Maybe one way to avoid that, I think, is by being a low-privileged user, because you can write in program files. And that's why they avoided everything in later versions regarding program files. And downloading a JPEG is, let's say, innocent at first glance. Can you please repeat the other questions?
Well, this was the question, why the name is used and why in that specific folder, why in program files.
And to the other question, for obfuscation with all the XOR and everything else, to not make it seem so easy to detect. Because it's one thing to see a VBS and even someone not IT savvy seeing a link that they don't recognize and might seem suspicious, but some garbage code that is obfuscated might not seem that dangerous, maybe. Yes, not just to avoid detection for antiviruses, but I mean even to the user, because some users might panic if they see a new file.
Yes,
If it's innocent, it's innocent.
Somehow, yeah. This is really a really good question. Thank you. Um, the idea is that obviously to masquerade itself as a Microsoft legitimate software, and under that specific directory in program files, because what do we have in program files? We have the installed software that is in our devices. So a normal user, when it's going to just check there, it's going to see something from Microsoft and it's going to say, oh, okay, this is legitimate, I'm not gonna delete anything from here. So this is one of the reasons. And also somehow to bypass the detections, because maybe the user is going to make some exclusion lists and is going to include that directory on the exclusion list, and somehow to evade detection.
I think the temp folder is better for that because nobody clears it and it's usually excluded.
Yes, temp folder is somehow a directory that it's commonly targeted by malware, indeed.
I was surprised to not see steganography used in the JPEG. I thought that's what it will use to do another GET request.
Actually, no. Stenography, it wasn't used, but the payload was each time obfuscated and encoded. So we had to check the decoded mechanism and retrieve somehow the payload. Thank you.
So how does this string get installed? Is it installed through initial access brokers, or do they initialize? Do they have their email campaigns directly, the malware operators, or do they go through initial access brokers or something? And linked to these questions is how do they get persistence?
Well, the first question. Usually the malware arrives through, as mentioned, through adware campaigns, to email campaigns, to phishing campaigns. And once it's on the victim machine, it's executed, and from that stage the user is compromised. If it requires administrator privileges, yes, some of them it requires administrator privileges. So, how do they ask for them? Well, because they are targeting users' devices, because they are not targeting somehow the banking institution itself, they are targeting the clients of the banking institutions to gain access to them. They doesn't really, they just hope that the user has admin privileges and...
they allow it to
yes.
run as administrator. Okay.
Yes. And there was a second question, sorry, could you please repeat it?
No, this was the second.
Oh, okay.
How do they like, do they use some other service like to ask for administrator privileges, yes, or does the binary itself downloaded from the internet ask for administrator privileges? That was the question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a question about the defenses. I can think of a scenario where you can poison the DNS at one stage, and at another stage, maybe after a reboot of numerous reboots, you can actually download the file from another website with the poisoned DNS. Do you actually take into considerations about your defenses in your solutions? Do you take into considerations these scenarios, like when dynamically analyzing and running those binaries and trying to detect the malware? Do you actually take into considerations the cases where it requires multiple reboots or just one reboot?
Well, we take in consideration multiple scenarios when we are developing our solutions, but I am not going to get into details of everything of how it's implemented and how it's done. Thank you for the question.
All right.
Okay, well, if there are any questions, you can find me in the lobby in our break, and I'm happy to respond to them. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.